The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Imagine you're holding a conversation with someone close to you, and suddenly you notice something troubling. Every word you speak seems to carry an invisible weight. Some words build bridges, while others, without your intention, seem to create small chasms. You realize that in this single exchange, you're not just communicating information, you're actively shaping reality itself, both yours and theirs. This moment of awareness brings you face to face with a profound question. If your words, assumptions, reactions, and efforts are constantly sculpting the world around you, how intentionally are you wielding these tools of existence? In the ancient wisdom tradition of the Toltecs, preserved and interpreted through Don Miguel Ruiz's teachings, lies a deceptively simple framework called the Four Agreements. These are not merely guidelines for better living, but fundamental shifts in how you engage with reality itself. They represent a quiet revolution, one that happens not in the external world, but in the intimate spaces of your daily choices, reactions, and inner dialogue. What makes these agreements particularly compelling for our time is how they address the very foundations of human suffering, the ways we unconsciously sabotage our peace through the habits of our minds and hearts. The first agreement, be impeccable with your word, invites you to consider the extraordinary power embedded in language itself. Your words are not neutral carriers of information. They are living forces that can heal or harm, create or destroy, illuminate or obscure truth. When you speak with impeccability, you're choosing to align your communication with integrity, avoiding the casual cruelties of gossip while refusing to diminish yourself through self-criticism. This isn't about perfection in speech, but rather about recognizing that every word is a choice, and that choice reverberates through your relationships and your own sense of self. Consider how often your internal dialogue runs counter to this principle. You might spend entire days speaking to yourself in ways you would never address another person, with harshness, judgment, and casual dismissal. The agreement asks you to extend the same careful attention to your inner voice as you would to your most cherished relationships. In doing so, you begin to understand that the relationship you have with yourself becomes the template for every other connection in your life. The second agreement, don't take anything personally, presents what might be the most challenging shift in perspective for the modern mind. You live in a world where personal validation often feels synonymous with survival, where criticism can feel like an assault on your very existence. Yet this agreement suggests a different possibility, that the actions and words of others emerge from their own inner landscapes, their own fears, dreams, and unhealed wounds. When someone responds to you with anger, dismissal, or even praise, they're often revealing more about their internal state than making an objective statement about who you are. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to others or dismissing the impact of their behavior. Instead, it means developing what might be called emotional sovereignty, the ability to respond rather than react, to maintain your center even when others are lost in their storms. You begin to see that taking things personally is often a form of making yourself smaller, of assuming that you exist primarily as a character in someone else's story, rather than as the author of your own. The third agreement, don't make assumptions, addresses one of the most subtle yet pervasive sources of human conflict and confusion. Your mind, in its attempt to make sense of a complex world, constantly fills in gaps with assumptions, creating entire narratives about others' intentions, feelings, and motivations. These stories often say more about your own fears and desires than about the reality you're trying to understand. This agreement invites you into the practice of curiosity over certainty, of asking questions rather than filling silence with projections. In a world where information moves at unprecedented speed, the temptation to assume rather than inquire has only intensified. You might scroll through social media, constructing elaborate interpretations of others' lives based on fragments of curated content. You might navigate workplace tensions by imagining complex motivations behind simple actions. The agreement suggests that these assumptions are not just inaccurate, they're actively harmful, creating unnecessary drama and preventing the authentic connection that comes from genuine understanding. The fourth agreement, always do your best, initially might sound like another prescription for perfectionism, but it points toward something far more nuanced and compassionate. Your best is not a fixed standard, but a fluid capacity that changes with your energy, circumstances, and growth. Some days your best might be extraordinary achievement. Other days it might simply be showing up with presence and kindness. This agreement frees you from the exhausting game of comparison and self-judgment, while maintaining a commitment to engaged living. These agreements, when viewed together, create a framework for what might be called conscious living, a way of moving through the world with greater awareness of your impact and intentions. They address the fundamental ways humans create suffering for themselves and others. Through careless words, over-identification with external opinions, stories built on assumptions, and the self-violence of constant self-criticism. But what makes these ancient insights particularly relevant for contemporary life? You exist in an era of unprecedented connectivity, where words can reach vast audiences instantly, where the opinions of strangers can feel as immediate as those of intimates, where assumptions can be broadcast and amplified across digital networks. The agreements offer a kind of emotional and spiritual hygiene for navigating this complex landscape, tools for maintaining your center amidst information overload and social complexity. The deeper question these agreements raise is whether true freedom comes from changing external circumstances or from transforming your relationship to whatever circumstances arise. They suggest that much of human suffering is optional, created not by life's inevitable challenges, but by unconscious patterns of thought and reaction. This is both liberating and daunting. Liberating because it places tremendous power in your hands, daunting because it requires taking responsibility for your inner life in ways that culture rarely encourages. Perhaps the most profound insight embedded in these agreements is that personal transformation and social healing are intimately connected. When you stop spreading poison through careless words, when you refuse to take others' unconsciousness personally, when you replace assumptions with genuine curiosity, and when you bring authentic effort to your endeavors, you're not just improving your own life, you're contributing to the healing of the collective human conversation. As you consider these agreements, you might find yourself recognizing the patterns they address in your own daily experience. The key takeaway is not that you must implement them perfectly, but that awareness itself is the beginning of transformation. Simply noticing when you're taking something personally or making assumptions already begins to create space for a different response. The second insight is that these agreements work together synergistically. Practicing one makes the others more natural and accessible. The lingering question these teachings leave you with is this: if you could inhabit these four simple principles more fully, what might become possible in your relationships, your work, and your sense of inner peace? How might your life change if you truly believed that freedom comes not from controlling external circumstances, but from mastering your own responses to whatever arises? As you settle into contemplation of these possibilities, allow yourself to consider that transformation need not be dramatic or immediate. Like water gradually reshaping stone, small shifts in how you speak, react, assume, and engage can create profound changes over time. The agreements are not destinations, but practices, not achievements, but ongoing invitations to live with greater consciousness and compassion. In a world that often feels chaotic and divided, they offer a path toward inner stability and authentic connection, gifts that ripple outward far beyond the boundaries of your individual life.